Now I will start with a new project to show how we created some of these other things like this height map, for example. So let me clear the screen. I'm going to go ahead and just use fractal noise, or rather plasma noise. I think the default value is 7. Hit OK. I'm going to adjust the value down to about half or a third. Try about a third of the full value, because we don't want this first layer to be very tall. And hit OK. Add another layer. Now we're going to create some more interesting hills and stuff by adding a second layer. Render the plasma noise again. I'll use an 8 instead of a 7 this time, so the hills are a little bit bigger. Hit OK. Now this defaults to multiply mode. We actually want to put this on, let's say, greater than. As you can see, the greater than is actually not doing much, because almost all the values on this right now are greater than the base layer, because we adjusted the value downwards on that. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to adjust, and this time adjust levels, and this gives us a histogram of what we're looking at. The tallest values on here are the most used values, or the most used colors, and they're nicely distributed right towards the center. If I take this bottom arrow and adjust this, you can see that I'm adjusting the contrast, or the value, so that the lower half of these values are being clamped or clipped off. And as you can see in our image map, we are now clipping this top layer. Let me hit OK, and I'll turn off the visibility. Well, it's not going to work too well because it's too bright. But if this bottom layer were clear or black, you would see this is what the top layer looks like. We just made these isolated islands, sort of tall areas, and the rest is black. So I will undo that clear I just did and bring back that base layer. And we now have a sort of a flatlands with small rolling hills from the first layer, and the second layer has these taller isolated mountains. And that is one way, not the only way, but one way to create a very attractive image map or height map with unique and interesting features. I'm going to merge these layers now. Hit OK. And go into 3D Designer, which is under the Transform menu under Filters. I'm going to go ahead and go to just using Object Color, which is a white color usually, or you can set the object color. And I'm going to turn off that specular highlight because that's kind of distracting. Now, as you can see, we have just a fairly uninteresting looking height map because of the lighting, but because of the basic lighting, but we're going to add some texture. But we do have some interesting features in here, as you can see as we scroll around. Not just all uniform, homogeneous, bumpy features, but we have some lowlands, and we have some rolling hills in these lowlands, and then we have some real tall areas jutting up out of the lowlands. And we could have done a lot more. We could have added some very flat areas, some rivers or something, or whatever. But that'll give you an idea of how to create some interesting textures or interesting height maps just using that fractal noise and layers. Now, while we're here, I'm going to click that More button. And as you can see, there's some additional options. The ability to create a texture in that swap image, or an erosion map. I'm going to start with that. Click on the erosion button, and as you can see, this just popped into a mode where there's all these interesting fractures and crevices. And if we turn on ambient occlusion, that'll especially make these more highlighted. But that kind of slows us down, so I'm just going to go ahead and make, well, actually, if I make it a little deeper, you see them better too. You can really see all these little crevices and things. There's a lot of parameters you can change and experiment with, but for now, that's just letting you know you can do that. And you can export that map that we created from here under on the bottom of this more tab. There's store lighting, store Z buffer, store erosion, and those are all things we're going to look at briefly. I will also go into create texture, which will create, as I said, a texture based on slope and altitude, and you have some control over how it does that, but I'll just go ahead and click create and click yes to this. It warns you that it's going to do it because you might have something in that swap image. You don't want to override that unknowingly. I'll just agree to it. We have, as you can see, this sort of a snow and sort of this grass texture. The default values are not all that interesting, so we usually like to change those to more interesting values. They don't have to be snow, they could be just different layers of rock color or whatever you're into. I'm going to go ahead and, well, I'll just select some interesting colors. Alright, that's not the greatest looking thing, but you also have some control over the intensity of that slope. Doesn't have to be any one specific value or one specific look. We encourage you to explore those options. Alright, so now that we've done that, we've created an erosion map, a texture map, and some other things. Bear in mind we can also turn on ray tracing for this light, which will, if we do that, that'll be baked into our lighting maps if we want to export those. So I will go ahead and store the lighting maps right now. They will show up over here, and then I'll also go ahead and do a version where we have the whoops, just misclicked something. Let's see, I think I changed the pitch. Alright, first of all, we want more interesting lighting than this, so I'm going to put the altitude almost all the way down, and the zenith almost all the way out, and change that light range until this becomes bright enough to see. That'll make it more interesting lighting. We don't want the light to be directly above, that's very bland. We want it to be more out towards the horizon, and then we'll probably make a sort of a backlighting in this particular case, and we'll turn on ray tracing. And that will give us some real deep shadows. It might not be desirable for everything to go completely black, so we'll use the second light to add a little bit of fill light. Now this one can be directly overhead, so I'll put the altitude all the way up and the zenith all the way down, and just turn that up just enough so that we have a little bit of a fill light, which is, you don't want to overdo it because then you'll lose all the uniqueness of having those dark shadows. So I'm fairly satisfied with that lighting, and I will store a copy of that. Store lighting, also store the erosion map, and let's see, we don't really need the Z buffer or anything like that, so let me click less. I'll just go ahead and render this shot while I'm at it, hit OK. Always be sure to add a little bit of anti-aliasing to make it a little cleaner image. It's okay when you're done to add some sharpening because that does tend to smooth things out a bit, and we want to see some of that detail still. So a little bit of sharpening, not 100%, but 50% usually does a really good job to highlight all the details that we have in an image. Alright, so as I was saying, we've stored these color maps and these other maps, and it might be kind of difficult to find them because we have so many things open. Okay, but as I said before, here's our lighting maps. One is, like I said, that key light where we had the light off towards the horizon, and you see these really dark areas. That's where our shadows were, our ray trace shadows. There's no detail in that. So it would be very useful to have that fill light. Like I said, we created this top-down fill light, and you might be tempted to use a layer to combine these two, but just using these store images you can combine and add. And as you see there, we just added those two layers, and now we have pretty much the complete value of what our lighting in that particular scene looked like. And this could be very useful for a video game where you don't want to do lighting in real time. You just pre-calculate it and make it part of your texture. Alright, so those are some of the new tools in Howler 9.5. I know I got kind of repeated myself a number of times, but there are sort of layers of features in this program. There are different ways of accessing them depending on how you work. Like I said, some of those features are available under the Stylize menu, and some of them are available directly from the 3D Designer, and there's some overlap because you might want to work inside a 3D program where you can visualize what you're seeing instead of working just in a filter by itself. Alright, so I hope I've been clear. These are, they can be general purpose tools for generating scenery, but they can also be very specific tools for artists who have very specific requirements for programming, coding, texturing for 3D programs, texturing for working in 3D television or film. They can be also just for hobby use. And I will leave you with that. Hope this has been clear enough. Hope you enjoy Howler 9.5, which is available for pre-order now, and should be available within, I would say, a month and a half, perhaps. We don't have an exact schedule, but we are aiming to finish up adding new features in July and work on stability the first half of August, and we'll know better by then how things are coming along. So I'd like to say ta-ta for now, and that's about it. Talk to you later.